Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm Sam Sachs, but you can just call me the dang newsman, or Mr. Newsman in more formal settings. And we begin at the Social Security Administration, where a whistleblower has come forward alleging that Doge stooges carried out the largest government data breach in U.S. history, and that because of grossly illegal mismanagement of sensitive data by Doge, every single American could need a new Social Security number. Other than that, those Doge guys are doing a real bang-up job. The allegations are included in a whistleblower complaint obtained by the New York Times, submitted by Charles Borges, a career civil servant who joined the Social Security Administration in January as the chief data officer. That gave Borges a front row seat to the chaos unfolding at the agency when Elon Musk's Doge team took over and demanded access to the most sensitive data the government has on its population. The Social Security numbers, names, birthdays, addresses, parents' names, race, phone numbers, and even medical information of 300 million Americans. The most explosive part of the complaint centers on a database known as Numadent, which is basically the motherlode of Social Security data. It includes all information submitted by anyone who's ever filled out an application for a Social Security card. For reasons that are still not fully known, Doge staffers wanted to create a live copy of that database and move it to a Doge-controlled server that didn't have any of the data safeguards required by law. Crucially, it didn't have controls to monitor who is accessing the data and what they're doing with it. Doge staffers were notified that this was a high-risk request that needed to be approved by higher officials. Unfortunately, the people who were in positions to stop this were all forced out of their jobs during the Doge takeover and replaced by people loyal to Musk. The complaint names 4 of them specifically: Aram Moghadassi, John Solly, Michael Russo, and Edward Korstein, who everyone might know better as Big Balls, one of the more infamous Doge teenagers. Korstein was also allegedly beaten in a suspicious incident in Washington, D.C., which was then used as a pretext by President Trump to initiate his federal takeover of the city. There's something up with that kid. But in this case, he, along with John Sully, were the Doge staffers who copied the Numadent data to the unsecure server. The approval to do so was given by another Doge clown named in the complaint, Russo. According to emails, Russo was notified that the high-risk nature of the Numadent transfer required his sign-off, and Russo replied with one single word: approved. According to the whistleblower complaint, quote, "This approval constitutes gross mismanagement, abuse of authority, violation of law, and substantial and specific threat to public health and safety. The transfer of Numadent data to a production account constructed as outlined in the risk assessment above entails replicating live Social Security Administration data on millions of Americans to an environment apparently lacking in independent security controls, including independent tracking of who is accessing the data and how they are using it." Among the laws violated by Doge staffers at the Social Security Administration The Federal Information Security Modernization Act, which requires federal agencies to maintain security controls over sensitive data. Also, the Privacy Act and the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which prohibits unauthorized access to protected computer systems. Looking the most guilty in all of this is Aram Moghadassi, who also approved of the illegal Numident data transfer and is quoted in an email saying, "I have determined the business need is higher than the security risk associated with the implementation, and I accept all risks associated with the implementation and operation." Oh, you accept all risks, huh? Well, the risk, according to the complaint, is that should bad actors gain access to this cloud environment, Americans may be susceptible to widespread identity theft, may lose vital healthcare and food benefits, and the government may be responsible for reissuing every American a new Social Security number at great cost. You still want to take on that risk, my dude? This is why there are laws in place to safeguard data. It's to ensure that a dipshit like you can't just come in and break everything and say, "Oh, my bad," afterward. Even today, Borges has not received any confirmation that the Doge server now hosting Numident data has the required independent security controls, meaning American sensitive information is likely still at risk. So what happens now? Who the hell knows? The Trump-appointed leadership at the Social Security Administration denied the allegations, denied that the data was ever insecure. So even if all our data was exposed, it's not like the current administration would even admit to it. It is worth asking how this was even allowed to happen, though. The answer is simple, really. It's because the richest guy in the world, Elon Musk, spent $250 million helping Trump get elected, and in return, Musk was given full reign to do whatever he wanted in US government systems, whether it be sabotage federal probes of his companies, spy on competitors, siphon off data to train his AI machines, or some other nefarious thing I can't even think of right now. And he took full advantage of it, dispatching his minions across the bureaucracy to literally break shit. In a functioning democratic society, this would not happen. In a half-functioning democratic society, the people who pulled this off would be charged or removed from office. In the US, though, it's a Thursday. Now to chaos and dysfunction in another part of Trump's government, the Department of Health and Human Services. 4 top officials at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention resigned from their posts this week, blasting Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for weaponizing public health and spreading vaccine misinformation. The officials include the director of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, the director of the National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases, the director of the Office of Public Health, Data, Surveillance, and Technology, and the CDC Chief Medical Officer, Deborah Ori, who said in a statement, quote, "For the good of the nation and the world, the science at CDC should never be censored or subject to political pauses or interpretations. Vaccines save lives. This is an indisputable, well-established scientific fact." The departures come after Kennedy moved to fire the director of the CDC, Susan Munarez. She's lawyered up and is fighting her termination. In a statement, her attorney, Mark Zed, said Munarez was being targeted because she refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives and fire dedicated health experts. On the same day as the resignations, the FDA restricted access to the new COVID vaccine. Previously, thanks to an emergency use authorization, anyone who wanted to protect themselves from the virus could get a shot. But that authorization has now been rescinded, meaning the only way someone can get a COVID shot now is if they're older than 65 or they go to a doctor first who can confirm they have an underlying condition that puts them at increased risk. This decision will lead to a lot fewer people getting the vaccine because they can't access it and because insurance won't pay for it. And that will lead to more people getting sick and dying just ahead of the winter months when the virus cases surge. Tens of thousands of Americans are still catching COVID every week. About a 0.5% of them are dying. Even more, though, are suffering from debilitating long COVID symptoms. The American Academy of Pediatrics called the decision from the FDA troubling. COVID never really went away, despite what the ruling class claimed. Now, I'm not saying RFK Jr. is a human virus. I'm just saying if a virus took the human form and was confirmed as Secretary of Health and Human Services, I'm not sure it would do anything different than what RFK is doing. And finally, there's that famous quote about how district attorneys could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if they wanted to. Well, Jeanine Pirro's office in Washington, D.C. failed to get a grand jury to indict a guy who threw a ham sandwich. That's right, federal prosecutors attempted to secure a felony assault indictment on Sean Dunn, the man accused of calling federal officers in D.C. fascists and then throwing a Subway sandwich at them. But prosecutors couldn't convince D.C. jurors to go along with the charges. They can try again, or they can lower the charge to a misdemeanor now, which does not require a grand jury. Grand juries are so compliant that this almost never happens. They're set up specifically to secure convictions. There is no defense attorney present, and the only side arguing before the jury and showing evidence is the prosecution. So a failure here is a pretty stunning rebuke of the White House's crackdown on the city, and Judge Jeanine Pirro, who the president tapped to handle prosecutions in the nation's capital. Pirro also failed to get a grand jury to indict a protester in the city who was accused of a felony assault against a federal agent last month, and she tried 3 times. This is also extremely embarrassing for the White House, which made a big show of arresting the accused sandwich thrower, publishing video online of dozens of agents raiding the guy's apartment, even though he offered to turn himself in. All that for what will likely end up being a misdemeanor. Anyway, throwing sandwiches at the feds appears to be decriminalized now, so go nuts. For this week in working class history, we're headed across the pond to London, 1918, when thousands of women working transportation jobs went on strike. Trouble started when bus and tram companies refused to provide women equal pay for equal work after they took over the jobs of men who were all sent off to World War I. 27,000 women had taken transport jobs on the streets and in the tubes as the war dragged on. The government gave a 5-shilling war bonus to workers, but only the men. The reasoning being they were the only ones with families to care for back home. The women obviously rejected that. Same work, same pay they demanded of their bosses. After being denied, a couple thousand women organized together at the Willesden bus depot and decided to go on strike the next day. Immediately, other transport hubs joined in, and within a week, 18,000 women were on strike, most of the transport workforce. The strike was supported by their male colleagues who correctly understood that if women were paid less, it would dampen their own pay over time, too. Other unions in the city also came out in support of the work stoppage. The London and Provincial Union of Licensed Vehicle Workers called on its members to take to the streets in support, causing service disruptions throughout London. The strike lasted nearly 2 weeks, and ended with mixed results. Women transport workers did not achieve equal pay, but they did get that 5 shilling war bonus that the men got, and it was extended to all women working in war industries. Thanks as always to the team at Working Class History for giving us access to their archives. They're on social media with more on the London women's transport strike and other events that happened this week in history, including the 1921 Battle of Blair Mountain and the 1968 DNC police riot in Chicago. Back with more next week. Listen up, gang. The team has Friday off. So, we're going to take care of this important piece of business on Thursday instead. Let's get right to it. This week's Rich Dick is Brian Armstrong. Armstrong is the CEO of crypto trading platform Coinbase, and he appeared recently on the Cheeky Pint podcast and bragged about firing people. Take a look.
Require people to justify to you, the CEO, if they weren't using AI coding.
That's true. That's true.
Because originally, I'm not meant to tell the story.
No, I don't mind. It's actually a good story. I mean, originally they were coming back and saying, all right, over the next quarter, or I can't remember if it was 2 quarters, they're like, we're going to get to 50% adoption. I was like, you're telling me, why can't every engineer just onboard by the end of the week? And so I went rogue.
Yeah.
And I posted in the all-in Slack
just
channel.
A light dusting of founder mode.
Yeah. I was like, AI is important. We need you to all learn it and at least onboard. You don't have to use it every day yet until we do some training, but at least onboard by the end of the week. And if not, I'm hosting a meeting on Saturday with everybody who hasn't done it, and I'd like to meet with you to understand why. Now, a few people were on vacation. There was a list of, anyway, I jumped on this call and on Saturday, and there was a couple people that had not done it, and some of them had a good reason because they were just getting back from some trip or something, and some of them didn't, and they got fired.
Yeah, you see, they didn't download AI software, so I ruined their damn lives. I'm guessing the workers who got fired happened to be the ones who most understood what exactly was going on here. Armstrong wants his employees using AI, training the model essentially, so that it can eventually replace those same employees. It's the same reason why tech companies across the industry are mandating the use of AI. The main promise of AI to members of the ruling class like Armstrong is to increase profits by reducing labor costs. AI models don't need to be paid and don't require benefits like healthcare. So if you can trim your workforce down from, say, 12 programmers to 5 programmers who offload a bunch of work onto AI software, voila, your profits go up. The problem is job prospects for young tech graduates are worsening now because of CEOs like Armstrong who rely more and more on things like ChatGPT instead of actual human workers. So while the rest of us are dealing with job losses, slop manufactured art, and chatbots that encourage children to kill themselves, the wealthy stand to gain enormous fortunes in this new frontier. But we've only just scratched the surface on what a prick Armstrong is and how he spends his billions to make the world worse. In the last election cycle, Armstrong plowed tens of millions of dollars into a pro-crypto super PAC called Fairshake. It got crypto heads elected to Congress, including far-right Senator Bernie Moreno, who unseated Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Brown was a longtime critic of the crypto industry. It was a whole big news story that the success that Armstrong's super PAC had in electing crypto freaks to Congress helped skyrocket Coinbase's stock and grow Armstrong's personal wealth by $2 billion. Being anti-crypto is simply bad politics, Armstrong boasted afterward. Armstrong is also a big believer and funder of the radical libertarian network state movement, which is pushing for new nationless cities to be established and governed by private companies. Here's how it's described in a recent expose on Armstrong by the New Republic. Quote, Armstrong is not just another tech CEO making the rounds in Washington seeking a few regulatory advantages. He harbors radical ideas about crypto's true purpose. He embraces the network state, a cultish tech movement that ultimately seeks to end countries as we know them, to decentralize governance in the same way that crypto seeks to decentralize finance. It goes on to quote Armstrong himself talking about this. Quote, we're actually losing freedoms, so I would like us to all in crypto think about how we actually go create physical places in the world to preserve freedom over the long term. I think that's ultimately crypto's destiny. Yeah, think about it. A land where Armstrong can not only fire as many people as he wants for not using AI, he can then also force his workers into indentured servitude. Or hell, even hunt them for sport if he wants, because anything goes in the network state. You know what? Maybe we can compromise with these guys. Let them go build their paradise on the Pacific garbage patch. We'll leave them alone, just as long as they promise to never come back. Brian Armstrong. He's this week's Rich Dick. Almost done here, friends. Another quick reminder to send in some sunnies. We're starting to run low. Show ends today with another sunrise from Oregon. It was sent in by Bass and Tay in Rainier at the Columbia River. Enjoy. Thanks, Bass. Thanks, Tay. That's the show. Thank you for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Find more MMN at means.tv. We also have a YouTube and podcast channel, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. One day, capitalism will fall. Until then, we'll be right here. Except tomorrow and Tuesday next week. We'll be back on Wednesday. See you then.